Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap up. Now I read a lot more than I thought I read in September. This is probably going to be a long one. I'm going to try not to talk too much about them, but it's me and I have a lot of opinions on books. I'm going to go in order of how I read them and let you know my thoughts and opinions. The first book that I read was The Chain by Adrian McKenzie. This one I was really excited for. It is about a chain of kidnappings. So someone kidnaps your child and you have to kidnap someone else's child. Once they kidnap a child, you get your child back. It's pretty simple despite sounding very complex. And the book is very simple as well. This was one of the books that was longest on my TBR, so I knew I had to read this month. It'd been on there way too long. And it was fine. It was enjoyable. I gave it a 3-star. To be honest, it has not stuck in my mind at all, so I don't have much to say, which isn't a great sign. The twist was very obvious. I knew full well what was going to be the twist the second it was possible to guess the twist. So I was like a bit about that. It didn't hinder my enjoyment at all, but I was a bit like, well, if it's that obvious, it's not that great, is it? The ending was fine. Didn't love it. I really don't remember that much at all, so I have nothing really to say. It was fine. The writing style was fine. Not my favourite, not my least favourite. I have nothing explicit to say on that either. Overall, it was fine. If you haven't read it and you fancy reading it, go for it. If you haven't read it and you're not sure it's your kind of thing, maybe skip. It's just not that good. Next we have something I have a lot of emotions on, and that is Vox by Christina Dalcher. We'll talk about the synopsis first. This book is about women being controlled by men by only being allowed to speak 100 words a day. Once they have reached their 100 words a day, their watch that is on their wrist, their word counter, will shock them, and the more they speak, it can end up being fatal. I was very ready for this story because I was like, feminist rule, you know? Screw the government, all that. Very excited about it. The description for this is not what the book is. It ends up that the main character actually ends up going to be a scientist in a lab, and the whole thing is about the science in the lab. Which, when I say minor spoilers, I mean minor spoilers here. She's a scientist in a lab working towards a cure for something, which they never really disclose what the something that she's trying to cure is. Okay? Nothing. And then, so the whole book was not what it was supposed to be. It was nothing like what it had advertised to me, so it was false advertising. Was not amused. And then, the ending. Could anything be more convenient? I mean, I'm not going to say what it is, obviously, because huge spoilers, but everything just happens so that everything goes the exact way the protagonist wanted it to. So she gets everything she wants because everything falls in line and without an explanation. Nothing, there's no like, oh, this happened because of this. No, it just happened so that she could get what she wanted and the ending could be the proper ending. It was pointless. It was stupid. I gave this a 1 star. I'd give it a 0 star if I could. It was the worst book I read this year. Hands down. Night Circus is a 5-star in comparison. I am not amused at all by this story. It started off solid, I want to say. Started off at like a 4-star. I was enjoying it. I was engrossed until the whole book changed, as if she wrote another book and accidentally merged the files together. Clearly I'm getting angry again. This was stupid. Stupid. And I don't usually call books bad because it's all down to personal preference. And I know a lot of people like, not many, the reviews were very bad. But a few people liked this, including my friend Catherine, who I buddy read it with. And I don't get it. For once, I'm actually going to say it's a bad book. Because you cannot give a synopsis to a book that doesn't exist, because a different book happens. Yes, okay, they may only have 100 words a day, but this book is not about this. It was just like a side part of the book. Well annoyed, well cheesed. Stupid. That copy's getting burnt. Now on to better things. I then read Poems for the End of the World by Katie Wismer, and this is a poetry collection in 4 different stages, I believe, and it begins from it goes through like romance and heartbreak to depressing end of the world. It's very depressing. The poems for the end of the world. It's not lighthearted. I give this a 5 stars. I am not very educated on poetry. I've not read poetry very often since I was in school. So I was not very qualified going into this to be reviewing this, but I was sent an ARC copy and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna read it. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I read this when I was feeling really ill and I couldn't sleep at all. I had tonsillitis, I was in a lot of pain, and I sat on this couch at something like 4 a.m. after having the worst night's sleep I've ever had with a cup of coffee. And it was exactly what I needed in that moment, and it was so good. It made me happy despite being depressing. I loved it a lot. I really hope that you guys go and pick it up. It released on the 1st of October, so it is out now. I really hope you guys go and check it out because Katie is great. She's a great YouTube channel, and the book was actually really, really good. Then I read like the entire comic series of Snot Girl. So that's like 3 combined novels / 15 issues. At first it started off, and I gave it a 3 star for the first 5 editions. I was like, okay, it's a bit weird. I would tell you what it's about, but I'm not entirely sure. She is a social media influencer. I don't know what's spoilers and what's not because I never read the description, I just read it. And she meets a new friend. That's all I'm going to say. Because I don't really know what's going on. It's weird, it's peculiar, and I'm usually okay with that, but not this one. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't get it. They're not rated very highly on Goodreads. They're in the 3s. They're pretty good, but I've seen a lot of good reviews, so I think this is very much a hit or miss as to whether you can just flow with the boat and just get on board. I could not get on board. I read all 15 issues and I still don't understand absolutely anything. And then to find out that the end of the 15 issues wasn't actually the end, and they've just decided to stop writing it or take a hiatus for a couple of years, and I'm like, but you didn't actually finish it. And I would have liked some closure, so I read the 15 volumes for nothing. I was quite upset, but I read it. I gave the first one 3 stars, the first 5, and then I gave the remaining 10 2 stars. Just wasn't for me. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. You go check it out yourself, but I didn't get it. It wasn't my vibe. Next, I read The Wolf and the Water by Josie Jaffrey. I was really excited about this because it is the tale of Atlantis prior to its sinking. That's not a spoiler. And you are in this place which is called Kapos, the ancient city of Kapos, and how do I describe this? It is a whole lot of plot that kind of intertwines, and I don't want to spoil anything per se. What is in the actual description? Okay, yes, so you can find out that Carla, her dad, dies, and the mother is forced to remarry in this society. Women have to remarry straight away, and so she marries a new man who is not a very nice man, and Carla knows that, but he also has another son and a daughter, and the son Leon and Carla get on really well, a bit too well. And then the whole thing about there's a choice whether to escape and abandon him with the rest of the city. I don't want to give anything away. This is the first in the Deluge series. It's really, really good. The main character has a disability, which we love some disability rep. So I would encourage that if you are looking for books with a disabled rep, with a disabled main character. That is a good book to choose. I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 star despite not really knowing entirely what's happening. It was really nice. It was my first time experiencing Josie Jaffrey's writing, and I would be very excited to read Josie's writing again. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was detailed and beautiful while getting a plot across, which a lot of beautiful writing suffers from. So I really, really enjoyed this, and I would definitely encourage you to check it out. It is out on October 18th, I believe, so I would recommend you pick this up. Then I read the sequel to Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which is Tales from the Cafe. I don't know if any of you know, but Before the Coffee Gets Cold was one of my favourite books of this year. It was beautiful, it was a magical place. So I was so excited for the sequel and hoping that it lived up to my expectations. And it did. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It made me cry. I was emotional. Everything the first book had, this book also had. It was everything. If you haven't read the first book, I highly encourage you to. The first book is about a time-traveling cafe, and you see 4 visitors to the cafe hoping to time travel backwards come into the cafe and do that. And then you find out that the owners of the cafe, their story kind of links in, and everybody's short story kind of links, not outwardly, but the writer makes it all flow very, very well. This book was the exact same. It was just more tales from the cafe. 4 more people, so it's kind of split into 4 parts, but they all link, and you also have the like very simple story of the owners of the cafe. It's all very simple. There's not too much going on. It's just a beautiful story. It's magical. It's something so lovely to read. And if you're into literary fiction, this is the ultimate literary fiction book, in my opinion. And I'd highly encourage you to check out the sequel and the first book if you haven't already. The next book that I read was the first installment of the Lumberjanes. I read this because I saw my friend Jay reading it a lot, so I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. It had lovely art style. I gave it a 3-star. I'm not sure I was the intended audience, but I'm definitely not the intended audience. It follows a group of scouts, I suppose, but they're Lumberjanes. But it's like a scout group, and they go through adventures, and weird things start happening to them. And obviously I didn't find out the full story because I didn't continue, so I don't entirely know every explanation as to what is actually going on. But I had no interest to continue. It definitely wasn't for me. It wasn't designed for me, so I'm not holding that against it. That's why I gave it a 3-star. The art style was sweet. It was just not very engrossing in my opinion, and I wasn't really feeling it, so I let it go after 1 volume. But I think if that is your kind of thing, you might enjoy it. I just personally didn't think it was for me. Then I read Ghosted in LA, and I read, that is a mouthful, Ghosted in LA, the volume 1, so I think that's the first 5 issues, and I really enjoyed this. I plan on going back to it. It follows a girl who moves to uni to follow her boyfriend, and then her boyfriend breaks up with her. So then she goes on a walk and finds a house that is inhabited by a bunch of ghosts, and they become her friends, and she hangs around at the house a lot, and then obviously there's plot developed from there. It was really enjoyable to read. I had a good time with it. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't too much to it. It was just an enjoyable read, and I do plan on going back to the future volumes at some point. I just haven't yet. The art style was stunning, like absolutely gorgeous. I couldn't get over how much I like that art style, and the story was fun. It had a bit of spooky element to it as well. It had me a bit tense at certain times, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I think if you have a chance to pick that up, I would. Then I read City of Glass by Cassandra Clare, which is the 3rd in the Mortal Instruments series, which I'm sure you might know. I have not been a fan of so far for the first 2 books. This was the best book in the series so far. I gave it a 3-star, and the fact that a 3-star is the best in the series just says it for me. But it's all down to Cassandra Clare's writing. I finally clicked on what it is that I don't like with Cassandra Clare. She is terrible at writing action scenes, in my opinion. She writes really, really well, but she over-describes a lot, okay? A lot. She does, and it's just not my cup of tea. But she also over-describes then when you're in the middle of an action scene. So it's like, oh, he went to stab him, and as he went to stab him, the bagel he ate at 10 a.m. this morning with his delightful cup of coffee with 6 sugars while on the way to the library started to gurgle in his stomach. And as he lifted this dagger, despite the gurgling, the moonlight shined upon his dagger and reflected into the deer's eyes across the lake, and the deer spun and ran away to the local raccoon's house. What is wrong with my mind? I don't know. But it was like so much description that by the time you're in it, I'm like, I don't care if you stab him anymore. I don't care. No spoilers, I've obviously made up the scene. There is no bagels, deer and lake, obviously, and stabbing. So it's like, I don't care anymore about this action scene. Like, you have gone on for so long about unrelated things or descriptions that it no longer possesses any suspense for me, which obviously isn't good in an action scene. Personal opinion, personal writing style, preferences, it's just not for me, and that's what's made me realise that I'm not a fan of Cassandra Clare's writing, and that is probably why I'm struggling with the Mortal Instruments series. I hear that her writing got better in the Infernal Devices, and I'm currently reading that, so spoiler. I'm only 160 pages in, I think, and the writing is better, but she still has the issue of she over-explains the action scenes, so there's my problem. That's why I'm not liking these books that much. Also, not so much in this book, which is why it's the best book, but she has the most boring book, and then an action scene that happens right at the end. I was distracted, now I don't remember where I was. I'm so sorry. Something about action scenes. Yes, and then she does an action scene that leaves you wanting more. And then I read the next one, even though I don't like the book. So I think, to be honest, the first 3 books of the Mortal Instruments, like, all first 3, could have been one book. It literally could have been one book. That's how much blab was put into them. Once again, in my opinion, Cassandra Clare stans don't come for me. This is my personal opinion. But I'm glad to have finally enjoyed this one. It kept my motivation going. Next we have A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. Let's talk about the book first, Brooke. Don't get ahead of yourself. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling based in the land of Emberfall, that's the one, where Prince Ran has to find somebody to love and to love him back under his curse, same as Beauty and the Beast. And Harper, who lives in Washington, D.C., gets zapped to this new world. Now, my expectations were half high, half not high. I expected myself to love it because I expected good things. I didn't expect myself to love it, I expected good things. I loved this. It was a 4-star. It was so good. So good. But Gray carried this story. He is the bodyguard for Prince Ran, or like, not a bodyguard, that's not the word. He's the head knight or something. I can't remember what the word was. He carried the story. Gray was the love of my life in this story. I am so excited for the next book. I think it's going to be a lot more Gray focused in the second book, and so I am ready for it, and I own it, and I can see it, and I want to read it now. I'm ready. This book was so much better than I expected. It is so much more than just a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I thought it was amazing. The first, I want to say 100 pages, I was a little bit bored, and I thought this is not going to go well for me. Once I hit page 100, it kind of just started to make me fall in love. It didn't get any faster paced. It is a slow paced book, but something about it just hooked me then, and I was in love all the way through. Already want to reread it. If you have not read this already, it is worth the hype. Pick it up. Next I read How It All Blew Up by Arvin Amadi. This book follows 18-year-old Amir, and he is gay. And he is worried after somebody finds out in his school and threatens to expose him that his parents will not accept him because they are a Muslim family. So instead of facing the truth, he runs away to Rome. Now, first of all, what a beautiful setting to set a book in. A good choice. And over in Rome, you see him live his life. But you also follow him in the now timeline where he's actually in an interrogation room with him and all of his family. Him and all his family are in interrogation rooms in the airport. And there's a storyline there too. I give this a 2.5 stars. It was such a letdown for me. I'm so disappointed by it, which is really upsetting because I was hoping for a lot more. I did a bit more of an in-detailed review on my Goodreads, so you're welcome to check that out. But for me, it was just lacking a lot in what I was hoping to read from this story, which was a lot more about a Muslim family. I thought that would have a lot more of an input in it, and it kind of had none. Obviously I can't speak for that representation anyway, so I would encourage you to check out somebody else's thoughts on that representation. But in my eyes, as somebody who wanted to learn and was excited to have a book that showed me more of an insight into that kind of life that I wouldn't understand, I was disappointed by the amount of involvement the family had in the story. So it was a real disappointment, and even when the family were involved, it didn't really highlight much of the representation for being Muslim, and I was kind of like, okay, bit disappointing. Then the bit I loved was the bit in Rome. It was such a lovely atmosphere, and the story was great about seeing him live his life with his new friends, but there was a point where that got boring, and I was sick of reading the same thing over and over again, kind of thing. My main issue with this book is there's an open relationship in it, which was great because I wanted to see some representation, but I also thought open relationships don't get much representation as it is. So when you do do some open relationship representation. I would like to see it in a good, healthy relationship so people can understand that an open relationship is not a bad thing, and just because you may not understand it doesn't mean it doesn't work. I don't want to spoil anything, but it didn't work in this book, and so it was portrayed in a negative light, and that wasn't ideal because you should be trying to help the representation. This book is about a lot of different representations, so maybe try and help. I understand it furthered the plot, I get it. It just wasn't the best for me. I wanted to see more. It's just my personal thoughts and opinions. Also in this, if you've seen anything about this book, you've probably heard it already, there's a nipple story in it. The nipple story. Now the entire way through this book, why am I like this? The entire way through this book, people discuss the nipple story, and it's hinted towards what it's going to be. Now when I read it, I'm grossed out pretty easy, but like, not that easy. And when I finally found out what the nipple story was, I was actually angry. Like, I put the book down, I was like, that is disgusting and has nothing to do with this book. It doesn't further the plot, nothing. It just tells you the story. And you're like, gross. I didn't need to know that. And I'm repulsed by it. And I know a lot of people are going to be encouraged to read it because of that. I know. If you want to read it, go ahead. Just, you do you. But it wasn't necessary in the book. It shouldn't have been in there. It was gross. It made me angry and I had to put the book down because it was so disgusting. So, very, very disappointed by this book. And I know a lot of other people who read it were also disappointed. So, if you've read this, I would love to know if your opinions differ to mine down below. Then for another very large disappointment. And that was Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGuinness. This book follows a girl who sees sees her boyfriend cheating on her in the woods at a camping trip, and so she runs away. And on this run, she falls down a hill and she cuts open her leg. So she has to now, and no one finds her, she has to go and survive in the woods trying to escape with an infection in this big, large wound in her leg. I have not shut up about this book. Before I owned it, I couldn't find it, and I wouldn't shut up about how I couldn't find it. When I finally found it, I couldn't shut up about how I wanted to read it and couldn't find the time to read it. Then I read it. I read it in one sitting. It's a very short book, 270 pages or something. No, 230 pages, sorry. So I was sat there all prepared to read it in one sitting, and I did. Oh, the letdown. I gave it a 2-star, maybe a 2.5? No, I gave it a 2-star. How do I talk about this without spoiling? It's disappointing what happened with this book. I had so many high hopes. I was told it was very horror-y. I was told it wasn't a thriller. I was told it was a horror, but I should have done my own research. It definitely wasn't a horror. There were kind of gross aspects. There were. But even those aspects weren't done to the best of the ability of what I would expect from this story. I don't think I'll punch myself with it. That's karma, isn't it? Slagging it off. It was boring. It was so unrealistic. Now, the point of this story is she's not like other girls. She's got this knowledge of the woods and she can survive because of this knowledge. She kept boasting about it. That was the whole point. The protagonist is boasting constantly about how she has knowledge of the woods so she'd survive what other people cannot survive. And yet the things she was saying was so wrong. And I was like, if you actually had any knowledge, which I do not really, you would know that that is not physically possible and would not happen. So clearly you're just an idiot. So much for being like, I'm not like other girls. Which I hate that anyway. She didn't actually say that, but it was the vibe for the whole book. Then things were just happening that were so ironic. And the book takes place of like 15 days. I think she's in the woods for 15 days. Sis, no. If you read this book, you'll know why it's a no. She did not survive in there for 15 days. It did not happen. It literally did not happen. I'm sorry. This was wrong. There were so many wrong facts, which is fine. You don't have to be correct, but simple common sense would have told you, don't put that in the book because it's not true. Like, come on. Overall, I don't have much to say other than I was severely disappointed. I almost cried after with disappointment. I just wanted to love it. I mean, I almost gave it a 3-star and then I realised it was out of hope and there was actually nothing 3-star worthy about this book. Very sad. Also, the ending was so rushed. The ending was so unbelievably rushed. I'm not going to talk about what it is, obviously, because I would spoil it, but I wanted so much more, and I couldn't believe when it was just cut off like that. I was thinking before I read it that the book would need to be bigger. No, the book needed to be shorter. It was so repetitive. It was 15 days of the same thing over and over and over again. Nothing changed. It was the same thing. So, very unamused, very disappointed and very upset. I know a couple of people, not many people have read this, but a couple of people who I follow on YouTube have read this, and it was all kind of middle of the road ratings. It was okay, so I think that's kind of how it is. For some people it's okay. For me, I think because I hyped it up so much in my head, it was much more of a letdown. Basically, if it sounds good, give it a try. But this sells for 15 quid on Amazon and it ain't worth it. Then I read The Existence of Amy by Lana Grace Reaver. This was amazing. I didn't realise this before I agreed to read it, but it actually has a protagonist that suffers with OCD. I knew it was something to do with mental health. I didn't know it was OCD, and I am no voices reviewer for OCD because I suffer quite badly with OCD, and I talked about this on my Twitter once when I was going through a hard time. And so when I was reading this and I realised what it was she suffered with, it was amazing. She also suffers with depression as well, so that was it was like linked in with her OCD. It's a really short book. It's 270 pages. And it is so good. I gave it a 4-star. You follow Amy. It's not very plot driven. Be warned, it is purely character driven. Who has to go on a work trip to Australia. And it obviously shows how her OCD affects the simplest things you wouldn't imagine on this trip to Australia. I think this is such an important read. If you have any interest in educating yourself in OCD, and I mean proper OCD, not my pencils aren't in order OCD, this book is the perfect one for you. It actually is representative of OCD. Now, I have to say that OCD is different for everybody. Everybody has different triggers, everybody has different problems. This is obviously one case, but it is very accurate to me especially. But everybody does have their personal triggers and personal problems in OCD, and you have to be aware of that. But this was amazing to read and to see how well represented it was for me personally. And I would encourage you all to pick it up. It is not plot driven, as I said. Don't go into this expecting plot. You just follow her on her life journey and this trip to Australia and how her OCD affects her work life. It had so many of the own thoughts that I thought to myself, like, how am I going to ever function as a human being? And it just shows things like going through therapy and stuff. And honestly, just check this out. I really, really recommend it. And I hope that at least one of you sees this and picks it up, because it would mean a lot to know that people are willing to educate themselves. And if you have any idea of any books that are similar to this in OCD, and I don't just mean, like, you know, when an author writes a book and the character has OCD but it's not part of the story, I mean like one where the story is revolved around OCD, please let me know, because I'd love to read some more. Then I read this beast, Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. It took me 1 month and 2 days to read this, because I read 102 pages in 1 day, didn't pick it up for a month, and then read the remainder in 2 days, or 3 days. 3 days? I think. And I have to props to Kira for buddy reading this with me to help me get through it in the end. And that is not to say anything about the book's quality. I will get to that in a minute. This book follows God knows what. The East and the West, who are rivals to each other. The West follows the Queen, Sabine, I'm not sure, I can't remember, names don't get on well, who the West is kind of turning against because she does not have an heir to the throne and does not want to marry. Then we have the East, who have dragons, and they believe dragons are the gods, the West do not. And you follow Tane, you find out so many characters. You follow Tane, whose goal is to become a dragon rider. In the East, you follow in the West Iad, who is the Queen's guard. You follow another person called Niklaus, who I can't remember, he's from East, but he was banished from the West. And it starts with a book with him. There are so many characters, which is the problem with this book. Now, here we go. I gave it a 3.5 rating. This could have easily been a 5-star. Easily. If it had been 2 books. The problem is I couldn't invest myself in this book because every time I started to feel invested, the character changed and followed someone else. But it wasn't just following someone else, it was following someone else on a completely different side of the book, so either east or west. You followed someone like the other side, so you'd start following them in the east, where it's a completely different land. Some have got, they actually think dragons are real, the other ones do not. Some of them have got queens, some of them do not. It's a completely different place. And then there's side characters around these people that you have to remember who lives where. And it was just so much that I couldn't then submerge myself because I was too busy trying to spend the entire chapter remembering who it was just to jump back to the other person again. If you had removed, first of all, Nicholas, I don't know if I'm saying that right, I don't think he had any place in this book. His storyline was okay, but it didn't really play much into the book, so I think you could have just removed him completely and I wouldn't have been bothered at all. But I also think maybe removing some of the side characters would have been a much better thing, because in the back it has a character list and there's 170 characters on this list, and I'm not saying you have to know them all, you don't, but to keep jumping back was very difficult. It was not easy. I just think with a little minor change, or making this a duology, would have changed this book and made it a 5-star off the bat, because the writing, props to Samantha Shannon, she's probably got the most beautiful writing I've ever read. Wow. I think one day in the future I will definitely pick up some of her other books if they're not just shorter but have less POVs. Because my only problem with this book was how many POVs there were, or not just POVs then, but side characters, which wasn't necessary. It did not need to be jumping around. What I would have loved to have seen is a book all about the West and then a book all about the East. I know they'd have to tie them in somehow. I don't know how, I'm not the author, but that would have been really, really cool. But overall, it was difficult to decide between a 3.5 and a 4, but it went for a 4 because I couldn't invest myself. Which is such a I went for a 3.5, because I couldn't invest myself. But I'd still definitely recommend. I just wish there were some minor changes. I then read only two, short stories from the Blood on the Tracks Railway Mysteries by Martin Edwards. I'm reading these slowly. You can see I'm tabbing them as I go. They are a collection of short stories. There are loads of them. I read the first 2. The first one is The Man with the Watches by Arthur Conan Doyle. I really enjoyed this one. I'm not giving them individual ratings. I'm just going to rate the book as an overall when I finish it. Rude. But I do want to talk about them month by month as I finish them. I really love The Man with the Watches. I did not expect the end result at all. These are really, really short. Some of them are 30 pages, some of them are 10 pages. This one was 34 and it was so good. The writing was beautiful. I loved a lot of the quotes and just a lot of the description, which you wasn't supposed to feel any different about, but I did. I loved it. Really, really enjoyed that. Then I read The Mystery of Fellwind Tunnel by L.T. Mead and Robert Eustace. Did not like that one at all. The ending was a bit of a cop-out. Wasn't what I wanted, wasn't what I expected. Didn't like it at all. I thought it was a bit of a waste. Also, it was on the railway. It was on a railway track, not on a railway, whereas not on a train, but I wanted it on a train. I kind of thought all these books would be on the train. That's my own fault for sure, but those were my 2 thoughts on that. A bit random to put in here, I know, but I thought I'd rather give like little updates as I go, and then just rate the book overall. But so far I've had a great time reading this. Next I read Wranglestone by Darren Charlton. Don't know what I expected, to be honest. I watched Lauren Library's video where she recommended this and I'd never heard of it before, and I was like, oh, that sounds so good. The way she described it just had a charm. And I went to write a comment about Wranglestone, I did, and I posted it, and then I was just browsing through the comments and realised that everybody had written the same thing about the same book. And I was like, okay, we all clearly really like the sound of that book. And it did not disappoint. It follows, hang on, what is in the description? I always have to check what's in the description. Not much. Okay, how am I going to say this? We follow protagonist Peter, and he lives in Wranglestone, which is a lake... what's it called, like a National Trust kind of place, you know, like one of those places. And it has a lake, so they live in the middle, and then there's a lake, and there's lots of different islands, and they boat to the islands to get away from the zombies, because there are zombies. It is a zombie apocalypse book. And they're safe all the time except for winter, when the ice freezes over, meaning the zombies can come and get them. So that was pretty mysterious and dark. But we follow Peter and we follow the relationship, love interest with a boy, and I loved that it was queer. That was my favourite. And I love how this book did not follow the traditional norms of a zombie apocalypse. It is not your general book, a post-apocalyptic book at all. The atmosphere is completely different. There are a lot of plot twists, and some which I weren't sure about if I liked them or not, but I just overall did not know what to think of this book in general. It was very twist and turny, very action-packed, very enjoyable, very atmospheric. Really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4-star. I know I didn't say much about it, but if you're interested, I would pick it up. It's not something I want to say too much about. And then the final book that I read this month was Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. I did a whole real-time reading vlog and review, which will be up somewhere here for you to read, for you to watch, not read, for you to watch. And I give this a 5-star. This made me cry on multiple occasions. This follows Enchanted Jones and her journey wanting to become a famous singer when she meets Corey Fields, an already very well-established singer, and he begins to groom her. She is 17 and he is 28. This was heartbreaking. If I thought My Dark Vanessa was a hard read last month or the month before, boy was I wrong. I had to keep putting this book down to cry and to be angry. I'm getting a little bit emotional about it now, I'm not gonna lie. Oh, this was hard. This was beautiful. It's so hard to say you love a story because I hated this story. I hated every second reading it. I just didn't want to put myself through this, and yet it was one of the best reading experiences I've had. Tiffany D. Jackson has a talent. This is the first book I've read from him, and I'm so going to go and read the rest of her books because wow. Not only followed her journey through being groomed, but also her experience as a black woman and how the police like to invalidate black women's claims, and I really loved that aspect as well. It was very educational, very well written, and wow. I don't even want to say too much because I think everybody should just go and read this. Impeccable. Loved it. I'm getting obsessed. So that is the end of my September wrap up. This is a lot of footage, so I'm going to have to cut this down by a lot. I really hope this was helpful. I know I sped through them quite fast, but I read way too many books to discuss, and to be honest, I don't even remember some of the earlier ones, which isn't a good sign. But I really hope you stuck to the end and got some recommendations. If you did, let me know which book you're most likely to pick up out of this bunch, if any. Which book you've read and loved or hated from the stack of books I've had, and any opinions you agree or disagree on, because I would love to chat to you in the comments. These are my favourite videos to chat in the comments about because we always have such differing opinions and it's fascinating. So please do that down below, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye!